Greetings everyone, my name is G-Rod and this is Let's Build, where I build a Lego set, time to different media, and talk about the facts concerning the topic of the build. How many levels of a game will it take to complete the set? To find out, let's build. Today's build is the Lego Nintendo Entertainment System Super Mario versus the original Super Mario Bros. I will not be playing any of the soundtrack for this game for copyright reasons, and unfortunately that also means no sound effects because the original game you did not have options to separate sound versus music to turn on and off at your leisure. So the footage I am capturing for this game is for science and educational purposes. There will be plot spoilers for this classic 1985 game, so you have been warned. I will play through each of the levels at least one time before using the warp pipes, or else I will go insane. Specifications of the Lego set. Enjoy an original. With authentic reproductions of the original console, controller, and game pack cartridge, plus a retro-styled 1980s TV, the exclusive new LEGO Nintendo Entertainment System gives fans of Super Mario Bros. A way to recapture childhood nostalgic magic. Do you love video games? Do you play Super Mario Bros. Back in the day? Or do you just enjoy a hands-on creative activity in your spare time? If so, this nostalgic LEGO Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES as I will call it from this point on, model kit is perfect for you. Authentic and interactive. The brick-built NES is packed with realistic details, including an opening slot for the game pack with a locking function and controller with a connecting cable and plug. The console comes with a buildable retro TV featuring a flat 8-bit Mario figure on the scrolling screen, plus an action brick to scan with interactive Lego Mario. The figure is not included. Find it in the Lego Super Mario sets. The Mario reacts to on-screen enemies, obstacles, and power-ups just like in the Super Mario Bros. Game. Creative fun. This unique set is part of an inspiring collection of LEGO building sets for adults that make fabulous gifts for yourself and hobbyist friends who enjoy DIY challenges and proudly displaying their creations. Trigger nostalgic memories as you build this wonderfully detailed LEGO brick Nintendo Entertainment System, an interactive 1980s style television displaying the classic Super Mario Bros. Game. The TV has a handle-operated scrolling screen, and if you scan the action brick by placing a Lego Mario in the slot on top, he will react to the on-screen enemies, obstacles, and power-ups. Authentic details of the NES console are recreated in Lego style, including a controller and an opening slot for the buildable game pack with realistic locking function to delight Super Mario Bros. Fans. Sorry, my dog keeps licking me in the elbow. Stop it. Whether you were an NES gamer back in the day, a fan of retro stuff, or are just looking for an immersive, fun, creative DIY project to leave you feeling revitalized, this 2,646-piece model building kit is ideal for you. The buildable TV measures over 8 inches high, 9 inches wide, and 6 inches deep, and alongside the NES model that makes a cool display item for your home or office. It also makes the best LEGO gift for gamer friends. No batteries required. Combine this playset with the LEGO Mario figure in the LEGO Super Mario Adventures with Interactive LEGO Mario set to activate the TV's interactive features. Easy-to-follow instructions help you to build with confidence, even if you are a LEGO newcomer. Also included is an illustrated booklet about the creation of the Nintendo Entertainment System and classic NES games. This highly collectible building set for adults is part of a range of inspirational LEGO model kits designed for you, the discerning hobbyist, as you look for your next immersive DIY project. Lego building bricks meet the highest industry standards, which ensures they are consistent, compatible, and connect and pull apart easily every time. It's been that way since 1958. Lego bricks and pieces are dropped, crushed, twisted, heated, and rigorously analyzed to ensure that this unique Lego building set satisfies the highest quality and quality standards. Highest safety and quality standards. From the manual, the NES, or Nintendo Entertainment System, launched in the US in 1985, has set the foundation of the current video game industry in the West and introduced millions of players to the compelling worlds of Mario, Zelda, Metroid, and more. Now held in high esteem by gamers all over the world, it's still the control deck that puts you in control of incredible fun. When we set out to recreate this classic TV and console combo, we wanted to do more than just build models that looked the part. We also wanted them to be packed with features and functions from the originals. That's why small but authentic details such as input-output slots, antennas, and controls are there, and why you can place a game pack in the console, change channels on the TV, and watch a moving image. In the early 1980s, the team at Nintendo set an ambitious goal to develop a new cartridge-based video game console that would deliver experiences that were then available only on powerful arcade counterparts. The NES would go on to not only offer the thrill of arcade games in the home, but to usher in entirely new types of experiences. It was Lego designers Pablo Gonzalez, Leon Pingenberg, I'm sorry, I probably butchered your name, and Derry McCabe, who took up the challenge of creating Lego replicas of both the NES and a retro-styled 1980s TV. Luckily, the size of a number of existing Lego elements matched closely with key visual details on the original console and controller, allowing the designers to construct models that were as close to true to scale as possible. The TV, while not one-to-one, actually matches the instructional drawings in the original booklet that came with the NES when it launched. How successful were the Lego designers? Simply pick up the controller and experience how your muscle memory kicks in. All the controls and buttons are exactly where your thumbs remember them to be. 17 games launched alongside the NES console in 1985, and one of them, a game called Super Mario Bros., would redefine what home video games could be. Although Mario got his start in the arcade hit Donkey Kong, it was his adventure through the Mushroom Kingdom that truly set the stage for many more fresh experiences from Nintendo and its publishing partners that would help define video gaming for decades to come. Creating a classic 1980s style, Lego TV with a functional scrolling screen proved to be a major challenge for the design team. Not only did all the moving parts have to work reliably and scroll without clashing, the gearing and hand crank had to turn smoothly and consistently. The team created an automated test rig and carried out a 20-hour scrolling test before they were satisfied. On the console, the game pack holder was also rigorously tested, being pushed to 8,000 times in a row to ensure the mechanical design was durable enough. Combine this set with Lego Mario to add another dimension to the experience. Removing the center panel on top of the TV reveals a unique tag. Scan it with your Lego Mario, then place him in the slot. He will then start to react to the on-screen obstacles, power-ups, and enemies, all to the theme music of the original Super Mario Bros. Game. The Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, is an 8-bit home video game console produced by Nintendo. It was first released in Japan on July 15th of 1983 as the Family Computer, or Famicom. It was released in U.S. test markets as the redesigned NES in October of 1985 and fully launched in the U.S. the following year. The NES was distributed in Europe, Australia, and parts of Asia throughout the 1980s under various names. As a third generation console, it mainly competed with Sega's Master System. The NES was designed by Masayuki Uemura. Nintendo's president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, called for a simple, cheap console that could run arcade games on cartridges. The controller design was reused from Nintendo's portable Game & Watch hardware. The Western model was redesigned to resemble a video cassette recorder. Nintendo released add-ons such as the NES Zapper Light Gun for several shooting games and Rob, R-O-B, a toy robot accessory. The NES is regarded as one of the most influential consoles. It helped revitalize the American gaming industry following the video game crash of 1983 and pioneered a now standard business model of licensing third-party developers to produce and distribute games. The NES features several groundbreaking games, including Super Mario Bros. From 1985, The Legend of Zelda from 1986, Metroid, also 1986, and Mega Man from 1987, which have become major franchises. The NES dominated Japanese and North American markets, but initially underperformed in Europe, where it faced strong competition from the Sega Master System and microcomputers. With 61.91 million units sold, it is one of the best-selling consoles of all time. It was succeeded in 1990 by the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES or SNES. The video game industry experienced rapid growth in popularity from the late 1970s to the early 1980s, marked by the golden age of arcade games and the second generation of consoles. Games like Space Invaders from 1978 became a phenomenon across arcades worldwide, while home consoles such as the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision gained footholds in the American market. Many companies emerged to capitalize on the growing industry, including the playing card manufacturer Nintendo. Hiroshi Yamauchi, who had been Nintendo's president since 1949, realized that breakthroughs in the electronics industry meant that entertainment products could be produced at lower prices. Companies such as Atari and Magnavox were already selling gaming devices for use with television sets to moderate success. Yamauchi negotiated a license with Magnavox to sell its game console, the Magnavox Odyssey. Since Nintendo's operation was not yet sophisticated enough to design its own hardware, Yamauchi forged an alliance with the Mitsubishi Electric and hired several Sharp Electronics employees to assist in developing the Color TV Game 6 in Japan. This was followed by a more successful sequel, the Color TV Game 15, and the handheld Game & Watch series. The successes of these machines gave Yamauchi the confidence to expand Nintendo's influence in the fledgling video game industry. In 1978, Yamauchi split Nintendo into separate research and development divisions. He appointed Masayuki Uemura as head of Nintendo Research and Development 2, a division that solely focused on hardware. Yamauchi, through extensive discussions with Uemura and other engineers, recognized the potential of the developing console beyond gaming. He envisioned a home computer system disguised as a toy, which could significantly expand Nintendo's reach if it became popular with children. This popularity would drive demands for games with Nintendo as the sole provider. Indeed, by 1980, several systems had already been released in Japan by both American and Japanese companies. Yamauchi tasked Uemura with developing a system that would be superior to its competitors and difficult to replicate for at least a year. Uemura's main challenge was economic rather than technological, while Yamauchi wanted the system to be affordable enough for widespread household adoption, aiming for a price of 9,800 yen, less than $75, compared to existing machines priced at 30,000 yen to 50,000 yen, $200 to $350. The new system had to outperform other systems, both Japanese and American, while being significantly more affordable. As development progressed on the new video game system, engineers sought Yamauchi's guidance on its features. They questioned whether to include a disk drive, keyboard, data port, as well as the potential for a modem, expanded memory, and other computer-like capabilities. Yamauchi ultimately instructed Uemura to prioritize simplicity and affordability, omitting these peripherals entirely. Game cartridges, which Uemura saw as less intimidating to consumers, were chosen as the format. The team designed the system with 2,000 bytes of random access memory, or RAM, significantly more than Atari's 256 bytes. Larger cartridges were also allowed for far more complex games with 32 times the code capacity of Atari cartridges. The console's hardware was largely based on arcade video games, particularly the hardware for Namco's Galaxian from 1979 and Nintendo's Donkey Kong, with the goal of matching their powerful sprite and scrolling capabilities in a home system. A test model was constructed in October of 1982 to verify the functionality of the hardware, and work began on programming tools. Because 65XX CPUs had not been manufactured or sold in Japan by that time, no cross-development software was available, and it had to be developed from scratch. Early Famicom games were written on a NEC PC 801 computer. I'm sorry. I said that all kinds of weird. NEC PC 8001 computer. I don't know if that was any better. LEDs on a grid were used with a digitizer to design graphics, as no such software design tools had existed at the time. The code name for the project was Gamecom, but Masayuki Uemura's wife proposed the name Famicom, arguing that, in Japan, Pasicon is used to mean a personal computer, but it is neither a home nor a personal computer. Perhaps we should say it is a family computer. Meanwhile, Hiroshi Yamauchi decided that the console should use a red and white theme after seeing a billboard for DX Antenna, a Japanese antenna manufacturer which used those colors. The Famicom was influenced by the ColecoVision, Coleco's competition against the Atari 2600 in the United States. The ColecoVision's top seller was a port of Nintendo's Donkey Kong. The project's chief manager, Takao Sawano, sorry if I said that wrong, brought a ColecoVision home to his family, impressed by its smooth graphics, which contrasts with the flicker and slowdown commonly seen on Atari's 2600 games. Uemura said that the ColecoVision set the bar for the Famicom. They wanted to surpass it and match the more powerful Donkey Kong arcade hardware, so they took a Donkey Kong arcade cabinet to chip manufacturer Ricoh for analysis, which led to Ricoh producing the Picture Processing Unit, or PPU, chip for the NES. Original plans for Famicom's cartridges to be the size of a cassette tape, but ultimately they ended up being twice as big. Careful design attention was paid to the cartridge connectors because loose and faulty connections often plagued the arcade machines. As it necessitated 60 connection lines for the memory and expansion, Nintendo decided to produce its own connectors. The controllers are hardwired to the console with no connectors for cost reasons. The controller designs were reused from the Game & Watch machines, although the Famicom design team originally wanted to use arcade-style joysticks, even dismantling some from American game consoles to see how they worked. There were concerns regarding the durability of a joystick design and that children might step on joysticks on the floor. Katsuya Nakawaka attached a Game & Watch D-pad to the Famicom prototype and found that it was easy to use and caused no discomfort. Ultimately, though, they installed a 15-pin expansion port on the front of the console so that an optional arcade-style joystick could be used. Gunpei Yokoi suggested an eject lever, which was not necessary, but he believed that children could be entertained by pressing it. Uemura adopted this idea. Uemura added a microphone to the second controller with the idea that it could be used to make players' voices sound through the TV speaker. The Japanese release. The console that was released on July 15, 1983 as the home cassette type video game family computer for 14,800 yen, equivalent to 18,400 in 2019, with 3 ports of Nintendo's successful arcade games, Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye. The Famicom was slow to gather success. A bad chipset caused early revisions to crash. Following a product recall and a reissue with a new motherboard, the Famicom's popularity soared, becoming the best-selling game console in Japan by the end of 1984 in what came to be called the Famicom boom. Nintendo launched the system with only first-party games, but after being approached by Namco and Hudson Soft in 1984, agreed to produce third-party games for only 30% fee for console licensing and production costs. This rate continued in the industry for consoles and digital storefront into the 21st century. For the North American release, Nintendo targeted the North American market, entering distribution negotiations with Atari Inc. to release a redesigned Famicom with Atari's name as the Nintendo Advanced Video Gaming System. The deal was set to be finalized and signed at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in June of 1983. However, Atari discovered that at the show that its competitor Coleco was illegally demonstrating its Coleco Atom computer with Nintendo's Donkey Kong game. This violation of Atari's exclusive license with Nintendo to publish the game for its own computer systems delayed the implementation of Nintendo's game console marketing contract with Atari. Atari's CEO, Ray Kassar, was fired the next month, so the deal went nowhere, and Nintendo decided to market its system on its own. Subsequent plans for the Nintendo Advanced Video System likewise never materialized. It was privately demonstrated as a repackaged Famicom console featuring a keyboard, cassette data recorder, wireless joystick controller, and a special basic cartridge. By the beginning of 1985, more than 2.5 million Famicom units had been sold in Japan, and Nintendo soon announced plans to release it in North America as the Advanced Video Entertainment System, AVS, that year. The American video game press was skeptical that the console would have any success in the region, as the industry was still recovering from the video game crash of 1983. The March 1985 issue of Electronic Games magazine stated that the video game market in America has virtually disappeared, and that this could be a miscalculation on Nintendo's part. The Famicom hardware first made its North American debut in the arcades in the form of the Nintendo VS system in 1984, or the Versus system. The system's success in arcades paved the way for the official release of the NES console. With US retailers refusing to stock game consoles, Yamauchi realized that there was still a market for video games in the arcades, so he introduced the Famicom to North America through the arcade industry. The Versus system became a major success in North American arcades, becoming the highest grossing arcade machine of 1985 in the United States. By the time the NES launched, nearly 100,000 Versus systems had been sold to American arcades. The success of the Versus system gave Nintendo the confidence to release the Famicom in North America as a video game console, for which there was growing interest due to Nintendo's positive reputation in the arcades. It also gave Nintendo the opportunity to test new games as Versus packs in the arcades to determine which games to release for the NES launch. At the 1985 Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, Nintendo unveiled the American version of the Famicom, a stripped-down and cost-reduced redesign of the Advanced Video System, AVS, having abandoned the home computer approach. Nintendo purposefully redesigned the system to avoid resembling a video game console and avoided terms associated with the game consoles. Marketing manager Gail Tilden chose the term Game Pack for cartridges, Control Deck for the console, and Entertainment System for the whole platform. Renamed the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, the new and cost-reduced version lacked most of the upscale features added in the AVS, but retained many of its audiophile-inspired designed elements, such as the gray color scheme and boxy form factor. Disappointed with the cosmetically raw prototype part that they received from Japan, which they nicknamed the Lunchbox, Nintendo of America designers Lance Barr and Don Janes added the two-toned gray, the black stripe, and the red lettering. To obscure the video game connotation, the NES replaced the top-loading cartridge slot of the Famicom and AVS with a front-loading chamber for software cartridges that kept the inserted cartridge out of view, reminiscent of a video cassette recorder. The Famicom's pair of hard-wired controllers and the AVS's wireless controllers were replaced with two custom 7-pin sockets for detachable wired controllers. At June 1985's Consumer Electronics Show, CES, Nintendo unveiled the American version of its Famicom, with a new case redesigned by Lance Barr and featuring a zero-insertion force cartridge slot. The change from a top loader in the Famicom to a front loader was to make the new console more like a video cassette recorder, which had grown in popularity by 1985, and differentiate the unit from the past video game consoles. Additionally, Uemura explained that Nintendo developers had feared that the console's electronics might face electrostatic hazards in dry American states such as Arizona and Texas, and a front-loading design would be safer if children handled the console carelessly. This was deployed as the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES. Nintendo seeded these first systems into limited American test markets starting in New York City on October 18, 1985, and followed up in Los Angeles in February of 1986. The American nationwide release came on September 27th of 1986. Nintendo released 17 launch games: 10-Yard Fight, Baseball, Clue Clue Land, Duck Hunt, Excite Bike, Golf, Gyromite, Hogan's Alley, Ice Climber, Kung Fu, Pinball, Soccer, Stack Up, Super Mario Bros., Tennis, Wild Gunman, and Wrecking Crew. Nintendo contracted Worlds of Wonder to distribute the console physically. WoW salesman Jim Wims distinctly recalled delivering an ultimatum. If you want to sell Tutty Rupskin and you want to sell laser tag, you're gonna sell Nintendo as well. And if you feel that strongly about it, then you ought to just resign the line now. This marketing tactic led to the NES's financial success in North America in its first year. Nintendo of America would later terminate the contract and hired the company's sales staff, whom Atari offered them in 1983, while taking on physical distribution of the console itself. The system's launch represented not only a new product, but also a reframing of the severely damaged home video game market in North America. The 1983 video game crash had occurred in large part due to a lack of consumer and retailer confidence in video games, which had been partially due to confusion and misrepresentation in video game marketing. Prior to the NES, the packaging of many video games presented bombastic artwork which did not represent a game's actual graphics. Furthermore, a single game such as Pac-Man appeared across consoles with substantial variations in graphics, sound, and general quality. In contrast, Nintendo's marketing strategy aimed to regain consumer and retailer confidence by delivering a singular platform whose graphics could be represented truthfully and whose qualities were clearly defined. To differentiate Nintendo's new home platform from the perception of a troubled and shallow video game market still reeling from the 1983 crash, the company freshened its product nomenclature and established a strict product approval and licensing policy. The overall platform is referred to as Entertainment System instead of a video game system, is centered upon a machine called a control deck instead of a console, and features software cartridges called game packs instead of video games. This allowed Nintendo to gain more traction in selling the game system in toy stores. To deter production of games which had not been licensed by Nintendo and to prevent copying, the 10 NES lockout chip systems acts as a lock and key coupling of each game pack and control deck. The packaging of the launch lineup of NES games bear pictures of close representations of actual on-screen graphics. To reduce consumer confusion, symbols on the game's packaging clearly indicate the genre of the game. A seal of quality is on all licensed game and accessory packaging. The initial seal states, "This seal is your assurance that Nintendo has approved and guaranteed the quality of this product." This text was later changed to "Official Nintendo Seal of Quality." Unlike with the Famicom, Nintendo of America marketed the console primarily to children, instituting a strict policy of censoring profanity, sexual, religious, or political content. The most famous example is Lucasfilm Games' attempts to port the comedy horror game Maniac Mansion to the NES, which Nintendo insisted be considerably watered down. The optional robotic operating buddy, or ROB, was part of a marketing plan to portray the NES's technology as being novel and sophisticated when compared to previous game consoles, and portray its position as being within reach of the better established toy market. Though at first the American public exhibited limited excitement for the console itself, peripherals such as the light gun and ROB attracted extensive attention. In Europe and Oceania, the NES was released in two separate marketing regions. The first consisted of mainland Europe, excluding Italy, where distribution was handled by several different companies, with Nintendo responsible for manufacturing. The NES saw an early launch in Europe in 1986, although most of the European countries received the console in 1987. The release in Scandinavia was on September 1st of 1986, where it was released by Bergsala. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. In the Netherlands, it was released in the last quarter of 1987 and was distributed by Bandai BV. In France, it was released in October 1987, and in Spain, most likely in the 1988 through the distributor Spaco. either. Also in 1987, Mattel handled distribution for the second region, consisting of the UK, Ireland, Italy, Australia, and New Zealand. In other European countries, distribution was taken over by smaller companies like, I'm going to say this wrong, Bain Graber in Germany, ASD in France, Concentra in Portugal, Itochu in Greece and Cyprus, Sandobora in Austria, Switzerland, and the former Eastern Bloc. In Poland, the NES had its release on October 6, 1994, along with the Super NES and the Game Boy. In November of 1994, Nintendo signed an agreement with Steepler to permit the continued sale of the Dendy, an unauthorized hardware clone of the Famicom, in Russia in exchange for also distributing the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo anticipated the NES would have a 25% share in these countries and saw particular potential in the United Kingdom. It sold modestly in Europe, however. In Brazil, the console was released late in 1993 by Playtronic, even after the SNES. But the Brazilian market had been dominated by unlicensed NES clones, both locally made and smuggled from Taiwan. One of the most successful local clones was the Phantom system, manufactured by Gradiente, which licensed Nintendo products in the country for the following decade. The sales of locally licensed products were low due to cloning, the quite late official launch, and the high prices of Nintendo's licensed products. Outside of Japan, regions in Greater Asia received an Asian version of the front-loader NES, though imported Famicom systems were prevalent. Due to import restrictions, NES consoles in India and South Korea were rebranded and distributed by local licensees. The Indian version is called the Samurai Electronic TV Game System, and the Korean version is called the Hyundai Comboy. Interesting. The console sold very poorly in India due to affordability and lack of consumer awareness. For its complete North American release, the Nintendo Entertainment System was progressively released over the ensuing years in several different bundles, beginning with the Deluxe Set, the Basic Set, the Action Set, and the Power Set. The Deluxe Set was launched in the 1985 test markets, retailing at $180 or $179.99, including the Rob, a light gun called the NES Zapper, 2 controllers, 2 game packs, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt. The Control Deck bundle was first released in 1987 at $89.99 with no game, and $99.99 bundled with the Super Mario Bros. Cartridge. The Action Set released in April 14th, 1988 for $109.99 as the Control Deck, 2 controllers, an NES Zapper, and a dual game pack containing both Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. The Power Set of 1989 includes the console, 2 game controllers, an NES Zapper, a Power Pad, and a triple game pack containing Super Mario Bros., Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet. In 1990, a Sports Set bundle was released, including the console, an NES Satellite Infrared Wireless Multi-Tap Adapter, 4 game controllers, and a dual game pack containing Super Spike V-Ball and Nintendo World Cup. 2 more bundle packages were later released with the original model NES console. In 1992, the Challenge Set was released for $89.99 with console, 2 controllers, and Super Mario Bros. 3 game pack. The Basic Set retailed in the US $89.99, which included only console and 2 controllers and no pack in game. Instead, it contained a book called The Official Nintendo Player's Guide, which contained detailed information for every NES game made up to that point. Growing up, I had one of the power sets. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't a power set. It was the set that had the gray NES zapper, 2 controllers, and the Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt combo single cartridge, that was the action set. Finally, the console was redesigned for the Australian, North American, and Japanese markets, including the new style NES, or NES 101, and one redesigned Dogbone game controller. In Australia, this console revision was released with the cartridge compiling of Super Mario Bros., Tetris, and Nintendo World Cup. Released in October 1993 in North America and 94 in Australia, this final bundle retailed for $49.99 and $69.99, respectively, and was discontinued with the NES in 1995. Nintendo's design styling for US release was made deliberately different from that of the other game consoles. Nintendo wanted to distinguish its product from those of competitors and to avoid the generally poor reputation that game consoles had acquired following the video game crash of 1983. One result of this philosophy is to disguise the cartridge slot, designed as a front-loading zero insertion force cartridge socket designed to resemble the front-loading mechanism of a VCR. The socket works well when both the connector and the cartridges are clean and the pins on the connector are new. However, the socket is not truly zero insertion force. When a user inserts the cartridge into the NES, the force of pressing the cartridge into place bends the contact pin slightly and presses the cartridge's ROM board back into the cartridge. Frequent insertion and removal of cartridges wears out the pins, and the ZIF, the zero insertion force design, proved more prone to interference by dirt and dust than an industry standard card edge connector. The design problems were exacerbated by Nintendo's choice of materials. The console slot nickel connector springs wear due to design, and the game cartridge's brass-plated nickel connectors are also prone to tarnishing and oxidation. Nintendo sought to fix these problems by redesigning the next-generation Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, as a top loader similar to the Famicom. Many players try to alleviate issues in the game caused by this corrosion by blowing into the cartridges, then reinserting them, which actually speeds up the tarnishing due to moisture. One way to slow down the tarnishing process and extend the life of the cartridges is to use isopropyl alcohol and cotton swabs. Users have attempted to solve these problems by blowing air into the cartridge connectors, inserting the cartridge just far enough to get the ZIF to lower, licking the edge connector, slapping the side of the system after inserting a cartridge, shifting the cartridge from side to side after insertion, pushing the ZIF up and down repeatedly, holding the ZIF down lower than it should have been, and cleaning the connectors with alcohol. Many frequently used methods to fix this problem actually risk damaging gaming cartridges for the system. In 1989, Nintendo released an official NES cleaning kit to help users clean malfunctioning cartridges and consoles. In response to these hardware flaws, Nintendo authorized repair centers sprang up across the U.S., according to Nintendo. The authorization program was designed to ensure that the machines were properly repaired. Nintendo would ship the necessary replacement parts only to shops that had enrolled in the authorization program. With the release of the top-loading NES 101, the new style NES, in 1993, toward the end of the NES's lifespan, Nintendo resolved the problems by switching to a standard card edge connector and eliminating the lockout chip. All of the Famicom systems used the standard card edge connectors, as do Nintendo's two subsequent game consoles, the SNES, Super NES, and the Nintendo 64. The console's main processing unit, or CPU, was produced by Ricoh, which manufactured different versions between NTSC and PAL regions. NTSC consoles have a 2A03 clocked at 1.79 MHz, tooltip megahertz, and PAL consoles have a 2A07 clocked at 1.66 MHz. Both CPUs are unlicensed variants of the MOS technology 6502, an 8-bit microprocessor prevalent in contemporary home computers and consoles. Nintendo ostensibly disabled the 6502's binary coded decimal mode on them to avoid patent infringement against or licensing fees toward MOS technology, which was owned by the then rival Commodore International. The CPU has access to 2 kilobytes tooltip kilobyte of onboard work RAM tooltip random access memory. The console's graphics are handled by a Ricoh 2CO2, a processor known as the Picture Processing Unit, that is clocked at 5.37 MHz. A derivative of the Texas Instruments TMS 9918, a video display controller used in the ColecoVision, the PPU features 2 kilobits of video RAM, 256 bytes of on-die object attribute memory to store sprite display information on up to 64 sprites, and 28 bytes of RAM to store information on the YIQ-based color palette. The console can display up to 25 colors simultaneously out of 54 usable colors. The console's hard display resolution is 256 by 240 pixels, though video output options vary between models. The original Famicom features only radio frequency modulator output, and the NES additionally supports composite video via RCA connectors. The redesigned Famicom omits the RF modulator entirely, only outputting composite video via a proprietary multi-out connector first introduced on the Super Famicom or SNES. Conversely, the redesigned NES features RF modulator output only, though a version of the model including the multi-out connector was produced in rare quantities. The console produces sound via an audio processing unit integrated into the processor. It supports a total of 5 sound channels, 2 pulse wave channels, 1 triangle wave channel, 1 white noise channel, and 1 DPCM tooltip differential pulse code modulation channel for sample playback. Audio playback speed is dependent on the CPU clock rate, which is set by a crystal oscillator. The NES uses a 72-pin design for the game pack as compared with the 60 pins on the Famicom. To reduce costs and inventory, some early games released in North America are simply Famicom cartridges attached to an adapter to fit inside the NES hardware. Early NES cartridges were held together with 5 small slotted screws. Games released after the 1987 were redesigned slightly to incorporate 2 plastic clips molded into the plastic itself, removing the need for 2 top screws. The back of the cartridge bears a label with handling instructions. Production and software revision codes were imprinted as stamps on the back label to correspond with the hardware version and producer. All licensed NTSC and PAL cartridges are a standard shade of plastic gray, with the exception of The Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, which are manufactured in gold plastic carts. Unlicensed carts were produced in black, robin egg blue, and gold, and are all slightly different shapes than the standard NES cartridges. Nintendo also produced yellow plastic carts for internal use at the Nintendo service centers, although these test carts were never made available for purchase. All licensed US cartridges were made by Nintendo, Konami, and Acclaim. For promotion of DuckTales Remastered, Capcom sent 150 limited edition gold NES cartridges with the original game, featuring the remastered art as the sticker, to different gaming news agencies. The instruction label on the back includes the opening lyric from the show's theme song, "Life is like a hurricane." Famicom cartridges are shaped slightly differently. Unlike NES games, official Famicom cartridges were produced in many colors of plastic. Adapters, similar in design to the popular accessory Game Genie, are available that allow Famicom games to be played on an NES. In Japan, several companies manufactured the cartridges for the Famicom. This allowed these companies to develop customized chips designed for specific purposes, such as superior sound and graphics. On July 14, 2016, Nintendo announced the November 2016 launch of a miniature replica of the NES, named the Nintendo Entertainment System NES Classic Edition in the United States and Nintendo Classic Mini Nintendo Entertainment System in Europe and in Australia. The emulation-based console includes 30 permanently bundled games from the vintage NES library, including Super Mario Bros. Series, The Legend of Zelda series, and the system has HDMI display output and a new replica controller, which also can connect to the Wii Remote for use with a virtual console game. It was discontinued in North America on April 13th, 2017, and worldwide April 15th, 2017. However, Nintendo announced in September of 2017 that the NES Classic Mini would return to production on June 29th, 2018, only to be discontinued again permanently by December of that year. Super Mario Bros. Is a 1985 platform video game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It is the successor to the 1983 arcade game Mario Bros. And the first game in the Super Mario series. It was originally released in September 1985 in Japan for the Family Computer. Following a US test market release for the NES, it was converted to international arcades on the Nintendo Versus system in early 1986. The NES version received a wide release in North America that year and in PAL regions in 1987. Players control Mario or his brother Luigi in multiplayer mode to traverse the Mushroom Kingdom in order to rescue Princess Toadstool from King Koopa, later named Bowser. They traverse the side-scrolling stages while avoiding hazards such as enemies and pits, with the aid of power-ups such as the Super Mushroom, Fire Flower, and Starman. The game was designed by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka as a grand culmination of the Famicom's team's 3 years of game mechanics and programming, drawing from their experiences working on Devil World and the side-scrollers Excitebike and Kung Fu to advance their previous work on platforming athletic games, such as Donkey Kong and Mario Bros. The design of the first level, World 1-1, is a tutorial for the platform gameplay. Super Mario Bros. Is frequently cited as one of the greatest video games of all time, and is particularly admired for its precise controls. It has been re-released on most Nintendo systems and is one of the best-selling games of all time, with more than 58 million copies sold worldwide. It is credited alongside the NES as one of the key factors in reviving the video game industry after the 1983 crash, and helped popularize the side-scrolling platform game genre. Koji Kondo's soundtrack is one of the earliest and most popular in video games, making music a centerpiece of game design and has since been considered one of the best video game soundtracks of all time as a result. Mario has become prominent in popular culture, and Super Mario Bros. Began a multimedia franchise including a long-running video game series, an animated television series, a Japanese anime feature film, a live-action feature film, and an animated feature film. The player controls Mario, the titular protagonist of the series. Mario's brother Luigi is controlled by the second player in multiplayer mode and assumes the same plot role and functionality as Mario. The objective is to quickly explore the Mushroom Kingdom, survive the main antagonist Bowser's forces, and rescue Princess Toadstool. It is a side scrolling platform game where the player moves to the right to reach the flagpole at the end of each level. The Mushroom Kingdom includes coins for Mario to collect and special bricks marked with a question mark, which when hit from below by Mario may reveal more coins or a special item. Other secrets, often invisible bricks, may contain more coins or rare items. If the player gains a super mushroom, Mario grows to double his size and gains the ability to break bricks above him. The item protects Mario from a single enemy or hazard. Players start with a certain number of lives and may gain extra lives by picking up a green spotted 1-up mushrooms hidden in the bricks, collecting 100 coins, defeating several enemies in a row with a Koopa shell, or bouncing on enemies successfully and successively without touching the ground. The player may also spawn hidden bricks with lives by collecting every coin in the previous world's third level or by warping there. Mario loses a life if he takes damage while small, falls off the screen, or runs out of time. The game ends when the player runs out of lives, although holding the A button can be used on the game over screen to respawn from the first level of the world in which the player died. Mario's primary attack is jumping onto enemies, though many enemies have differing responses to this. For example, a Goomba will flatten and be defeated, while a Koopa Troopa will temporarily retract into its shell, allowing Mario to use it as a projectile. These shells may be deflected off a wall to destroy other enemies, though they can also bounce back to attack Mario, which will hurt or kill him. Other enemies, such as underwater foes and enemies with spiked tops, cannot be jumped on and damage the player instead. Mario can also defeat enemies above him by jumping to hit the brick that the enemy is standing on. Mario may also acquire the Fire Flower from certain question mark blocks that, when picked up, changes the color of Super Mario's outfit and allows him to throw fireballs. A less common item is the Starman, which often appears when Mario hits certain concealed or otherwise invisible blocks. This item grants Mario temporary invincibility from all minor damages and dangers. The game consists of 8 worlds, each with 4 sub-levels or stages. Underwater stages contain unique aquatic enemies. Bonuses and secret areas include more coins or warp pipes that allow Mario to skip directly to later worlds. The final stage of each world is a fiery underground castle where Bowser is fought on a suspension bridge above lava. The first 7 of these Bowsers are actually minions disguised as him, and the real Bowser is in the 8th world. Bowser and his decoys are defeated by jumping over them or running under them while they are jumping and reaching the axe on the end of the bridge, or with fireballs. After completing the game once, the player is rewarded with the ability to replay with increased difficulty, such as all Goombas replaced by Buzzy Beetles, enemies similar to the Koopa Troopas who cannot be defeated using the Fire Flower. And I will be reading an excerpt from the actual game manual for some of the plot information here. Object of the game or description. One day the kingdom of the peaceful mushroom people was invaded by Koopa, a tribe of the turtles famous for their black magic. The quiet, peace-loving mushroom people were turned into mere stones, bricks, and even field horsehair plants, and the mushroom kingdom fell into ruin. The only one who can undo the magic spell on this mushroom people and return them to their normal selves is Princess Toadstool, the daughter of the Mushroom King. Unfortunately, she is presently in the hands of the great Koopa Turtle King. Mario, the hero of the story, maybe, hears about the mushroom people's plight and sets out on a quest to free the Mushroom Princess from the evil Koopa and restore the fallen kingdom of the Mushroom People. You are Mario. It's up to you to save the Mushroom People from the black magic of the Koopa. How to play. As this game proceeds, the screen gradually advances to the right. The Mushroom Kingdom is made up of a number of worlds. Each world is divided into 4 areas. The 4th area of each world ends in a big castle. The princess, as well as her mushroom retainers, are being held in one of the castles by the Turtle Tribe. In order to rescue the princess, Mario has to make it to the castle at the end of each world within the given time. Along the way are mountains, pits, sea, turtle soldiers, and a host of traps and riddles. Whether or not you can make it to the last castle and free the princess depends on you. You're going to need sharp wits and lightning reflexes to complete this quest. At the beginning of the round, play starts from the beginning of the area. However, once Mario gets about halfway through the area, he doesn't have to go all the way back to the beginning after getting done in by one of the bad guys. When you get to the last castle, you can start the game over from the castle entrance. When play starts, the clock in the upper right of the screen starts ticking away. Any time left on the clock when you get to the end of each area is added to your score as bonus points. There is no remaining time bonus when you get to the very last castle. At the end of each area, there is a small castle, but before you get to the castle, you have to go up the big staircase and jump onto a flagpole. The higher you jump onto the flagpole, the higher the bonus you receive. Super Mario Bros. Was designed by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka of the Nintendo Creative Department, and largely programmed by Toshihiko Nagako of SRD, which became a longtime Nintendo partner and later a wholly owned subsidiary. The original Mario Bros., released in 1983, was an arcade platformer that takes place on a single screen with a black background. Miyamoto used the term athletic games to refer to what would later be known as platform games. For Super Mario Bros., Miyamoto wanted to create a more colorful athletic game with a scrolling screen and larger characters. Development was a culmination of their technological knowledge from working on the 1984 games Devil World, Excitebike, and Kung Fu, along with their desire to further advance the platforming athletic game genre they had created with their earlier games. The side-scrolling gameplay of racing game Excitebike and beat-em-up game Kung Fu Master, the latter ported by Miyamoto's team to the NES as Kung Fu, were key steps toward Miyamoto's vision of an expansive side-scrolling platformer. In turn, Kung Fu Master was an adaptation of the Jackie Chan film Wheels on Meals in 1984. While working on Excitebike and Kung Fu, he came up with the concept of a platformer that would have the player strategize while scrolling sideways over long distances and have above-ground and underground levels and have colorful backgrounds rather than black backgrounds. Super Mario Bros. Used the fast-scrolling game engine Miyamoto's team had originally developed for Excitebike, which allowed Mario to smoothly accelerate from walk to run rather than move at a constant speed like in earlier platformers. Miyamoto also wanted to create a game that would be the final exclamation point for the ROM cartridge format before the forthcoming Famicom Disk System was released. Development for Super Mario Bros. Began in the fall of 1984 at the same time as The Legend of Zelda, another Famicom game directed and designed by Miyamoto and released in Japan 5 months later, and the games shared some elements. For instance, the fire bars that appear in the Mario Castle levels began as objects in Zelda. To have a new game available for the end-of-year shopping season, Nintendo aimed for simplicity. In December 1984, the team created a prototype in which the player moved a 16 by 32 pixel rectangle around in a single screen. Tezuka suggested using Mario after seeing the sales figures of Mario Brothers. In February of 1985, the team chose the name Super Mario Brothers after implementing the Super Mushroom power-up. The game initially used a concept in which Mario or Luigi could fly a rocket ship while firing at enemies, but this went unused. The final game's sky-based bonus stages are a remnant of this concept. The team found it illogical that Mario was hurt by stomping on turtles in Mario Brothers, so decided that future Mario games would definitely have it so that you could jump on turtles all you want. Miyamoto initially imagined Bowser as an ox, inspired by the Ox King from the Toei animation film Alakazam the Great from 1960. However, Tezuka decided he looked more like a turtle, and they collaborated to create this final design. The development of Super Mario Bros. Is an early example of specialization in the video game industry made possible and necessary by the Famicom's arcade-capable hardware. Miyamoto designed the game world and led a team of 7 programmers and artists to turn his ideas into code, sprites, music, and sound effects. Developers of previous hit games joined the team in February of 1985, importing many special programming techniques, features, and design refinements such as these: Donkey Kong slopes, lifts, conveyor belts, and ladders, Donkey Kong Jr.'s ropes, logs, and springs, and Mario Brothers' enemy attacks, enemy movement, frozen platforms, and POW blocks. The team based the level design around a small Mario, intending to later make his size bigger in the final version, but they decided it would be fun to let Mario change his size via a power-up. The early level design was focused on teaching players that mushrooms were distinct from Goombas and would be beneficial to them, so in World 1-1, the first mushroom is difficult to avoid if it is released. The use of the mushrooms to change size was influenced by Japanese folktales in which people wander into forests and meet magical mushrooms. This also resulted in the game world being named the Mushroom Kingdom. The team had Mario begin levels as small Mario to make obtaining a mushroom more gratifying. Miyamoto explained, "When we made the prototype of the big Mario, we did not feel he was big enough. So we came up with the idea of showing the smaller Mario first, who could be made bigger later in the game. Then players could see and feel that he was bigger." Miyamoto denied rumors that developers implemented a small Mario after a bug caused his only upper half to appear. Miyamoto said that the shell-kicking one-up trick was carefully tested, but people turned out to be a lot better at pulling the trick off for ages on end than we thought. Other features, such as blocks containing multiple coins, were inspired by programming glitches. Super Mario Bros. Was developed for a cartridge with 256 kilobits of RAM, code, and data, and 64 kilobits of sprite and background graphics. Due to this storage limitation, the designers happily considered their aggressive research for space-saving opportunities to be akin to their own fun television game show competition. For instance, clouds and bushes in the game's backgrounds use that same sprite but recolored. The background tiles are generated via an automatic algorithm. Around July 1985, development time was extended to 3 to 4 weeks to adjust and fix memory bugs. Sound effects were also recycled. The sound when Mario is damaged is the same as when he enters a pipe, and Mario jumping on an enemy is the same sound as each stroke when swimming. After completing the game, the development team decided that they should introduce players with a simple, easy-to-defeat enemy, rather than beginning the game with a Koopa Troopa. By this point, the project had nearly run out of memory, so the designers created the Goombas by making a single static image and flipping it back and forth to save space while creating a convincing character animation. After the addition of the game's music, around 20 bytes of open cartridge space remained. Miyamoto used this remaining space to add a sprite of a crown into the game, which would appear in the player's life counter as a reward for obtaining at least 10 lives. After filling up leftover space, the game was released to manufacturing in August of 1985. World 1-1. During the third generation of video game consoles, tutorials on gameplay were rare. Instead, level design teaches players how a video game works. The opening section of Super Mario Bros. Was therefore specifically designed in such a way that players would be forced to explore the mechanics of the game to be able to advance. Rather than confront the newly oriented player with obstacles, the first level of Super Mario Bros. Lays down the variety of in-game hazards by means of repetition, iteration, and escalation. The level was finished around 1985 in July, when development time was furthered by 3 to 4 weeks to finish the rest of the game. In an interview with Eurogamer, Miyamoto explained that he created World 1-1 to contain everything a player needs to gradually and naturally understand what they're doing, so that they can quickly understand how the game works. According to Miyamoto, once players understand the mechanics of a game, they can play more freely and it becomes their game. Nintendo sound designer Koji Kondo created the 6-track score and all sound effects. At the time he was composing, video game music was mostly meant to attract attention, not necessarily to enhance or conform to the game. Kondo's work on Super Mario Bros. Was one of the major forces in the shift toward music becoming an integral and participatory part of video games. Kondo had 2 specific goals for his music: to convey an unambiguous sonic design of the game world, and to enhance the emotional and physical experience of the gamer. The music of Super Mario Bros. Is coordinated with the on-screen animations of the various sprites, which was one way which Kondo created a sense of greater immersion. Kondo was not the first to do this in a video game. For instance, Space Invaders features a simple song that gets faster as the aliens speed up, eliciting a sense of stress and impending doom which matches the increasing challenge of the game. Unlike most games at the time, for which composers were hired later in the process to add music to a nearly finished game, Kondo was a part of the development team almost from the beginning of production, working in tandem with the rest of the team to create the game's soundtrack. Kondo's compositions were largely influenced by the game's gameplay, intending for it to heighten the feeling of how the game controls. Before composition began, a prototype of the game was presented to Kondo in December of 1984, so that he could get an idea of Mario's general environment and revolve the music around it. Kondo wrote the score with the help of a small piano to create appropriate melodies to fit the game's environments. After the development of the game showed progress, Kondo began to feel that his music did not quite fit the pace of the game. Thus, he increased the song's tempos. The music was further adjusted based on the expectations and feedback of Nintendo's playtesters. Kondo later composed new music for the Super Mario Bros. Snow, desert, and forest level themes that appeared in the 2019 level creator game Super Mario Maker 2. Super Mario Bros. Was first released in Japan on Friday the 13th, September 13th, 1985, for the Family Computer or Famicom. It was released later that year in North America for Nintendo's Entertainment System. Its exact North American release date is debated, although most sources report it as released in October of 1985 as a launch game when the NES had limited release in the US. Several sources suggested it was released between November of 85 and early 1986. The arcade port for the Nintendo Versus system debuted in London in January of 1986 and was released in other countries in February 1986. It is the first vision of Super Mario Bros. To receive a wide international release, and many outside Japan were introduced to the game through the arcade version. The NES version received a wide North American release later that year, followed by Europe on May 15, 1987. In 1988, Super Mario Bros. Was re-released along with the light gun shooting range game Duck Hunt as part of a single ROM cartridge, which came packaged with the NES as a pack-in game as part of the console's Action Set bundle. Millions of copies of this version of the game were manufactured and sold in the United States. In 1990, another cartridge touting those two games and world-class track meet was released in North America as part of the NES Power Set bundle. It was released on May 15, 1987, in Europe, and during that year in Australia. In 1988, the game was re-released in Europe in a cartridge containing the game plus Tetris and Nintendo World Cup. The compilation was sold alone or bundled with the revised version of the NES. As one of Nintendo's most popular games, Super Mario Bros. Has been re-released and remade numerous times, with every single major Nintendo console up to the Nintendo Switch sporting its own port or remake of the game, with the exception of the Nintendo 64. Super Mario All-Stars, a compilation game released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, or SNES, features a remade version of Super Mario Bros. Alongside remakes of several of the other Super Mario games released for the NES. Its version of Super Mario Bros. Has improved graphics and sound to match the SNES's 16-bit capabilities and minor alterations to some of the game's collision mechanics. The player can save progress, and multiplayer mode swaps players after every level in addition to whenever a player dies. Super Mario All-Stars was also re-released for the Wii as a repackaged 25th anniversary version, featuring the same version of the game along with a 32-page art book and compilation CD of music from various Super Mario games. Super Mario Bros. Was immensely successful, both commercially and critically. It helped popularize the side-scrolling platform game genre and served as a killer app for the NES. Upon release in Japan, 1.2 million copies were sold during its September 1985 release month. Within 4 months, about 3 million copies were sold in Japan, grossing more than 12.2 billion yen, which is an equivalent of 72 million at the time. The success of Super Mario Bros. Helped increase Famicom sales to 6.2 million units by January of 1986. By 1987, 5 million copies of the game had been sold for the Famicom. Outside of Japan, many were introduced to the game through the arcade version, which became the best-selling Nintendo Versus system release, with 20,000 arcade units sold within a few months in early '86. In the United States, more than 1 million copies of the NES version were sold in 1986, more than 4 million by 1988, 9.1 million by mid-1989, and more than 18.7 million by early 1990. Nearly 19 million by April of 1990 and more than 20 million by 1991. More than 40 million copies of the original NES version had been sold worldwide by '94, and 40.23 million by April of 2000, for which it was awarded the Guinness World Record for best-selling video game of all time. Altogether, excluding ports and re-releases, 40.24 million copies of the original NES release have been sold worldwide, with 29 million copies sold in North America. Including ports and re-releases, more than 58 million units had been sold worldwide. The game was an all-time best-selling game for more than 20 years, until its lifetime sales were ultimately surpassed by Wii Sports of 2006. The game's Wii Virtual Console release was also successful, reaching number 1 by mid-2007, and at an estimated 660,000 units for 3.2 million outside of Japan and Korea in 2009. In August of 2021, an anonymous buyer paid $2 million for a never-opened copy of Super Mario Bros., according to the collectible site Rally, surpassing the 1.56 million sales record set by Super Mario 64 the previous month. Claire Edgley, I hope I said that right, sorry if I didn't, of Computer and Video Games gave the arcade version a positive review upon its ATEI 1986 debut. She felt the graphics were simple compared to the other arcade games, such as Sega's Space Harrier at the same time in the ATEI show, but was surprised at the depth of gameplay, including its length, number of hidden secrets, and high degree of dexterity it required. She predicted that the game would be a major success. In the fall of '86, Top Score newsletter reviewed Versus Super Mario Bros. For arcades, calling it, without a doubt, one of the best games of the year, and stating that it combined a variety of proven play concepts with a number of new twists to the gameplay. The arcade game received the award for the Best Video Game of 1986 at the Amusement Players Association Players' Choice Awards, held during their first U.S. national competition in January of '87, where the game was popular among arcade players. Reviewing the NES version, the Video Game Update segment of Computer Entertainment magazine in June of '86 praised the acute and comical graphics, lively music, and most of all its depth of play, including the amount of hidden surprises and discoveries. The review said it was worthy of a spot in the Hall of Fame reserved for truly addictive action games, and was a must-have NES game. By that September, teenage video game journalist Rawson Stovall declared in his syndicated column, the game's universe and plot elements help develop a special style that makes playing it a must. Top Score also reviewed the NES version in early 1987, noting that it is mostly the same as the arcade version and stating that it was a near-perfect game with simple play mechanics, hundreds of incentives, and hidden surprises, and an ever-changing environment, colorful graphics, and skillfully blended music. The Games Machine reviewed the NES version upon its European release in 1987, calling it a great and playable game, with praise for the gameplay, which it also notes is a simple to understand without needing to read the manual, and has alternate routes for problems that can occasionally be frustrating but rewarding, while also praising the splendid graphics and sound. In 1989, Ace called it the undisputed king of cutesy platform-style arcade adventures, and that the game is crammed with secret levels, warps, and hidden treats such that you would never tire of playing it. They listed it as the best NES game available in Europe. Computer and Video Games said this was platform/arcade adventure, was one of the all-time classic video games, with a multitude of hidden bonuses, secret warps, and mystery screens. They said the graphics and sound are good, but not outstanding. But it's the utterly addictive gameplay which makes this one of the best games money can buy. Retrospective critical analysis of the game has been extremely positive, with many touting it as one of the best video games of all time. Nintendo Power named it its fourth best NES game, describing it as the beginning of the modern era of video games and Shigeru Miyamoto's masterpiece. Electronic Gaming Monthly ranked it first on its list of the greatest 200 games of their time. Official Nintendo magazine also awarded the game first place in a 2009 list of greatest Nintendo games of all time. IGN included it in its list of the best 100 games in 2005 and 2007. In '97, Electronic Gaming Monthly named the All-Stars version of Super Mario Bros. The 37th best game of all time. In 2009, Game Informer named Super Mario Bros. The second greatest game of all time, behind The Legend of Zelda, saying that it remains a monument to brilliant design and fun gameplay. The Game Informer staff also ranked it the second best in their 2000 list of the top 100 games. In 2012, G4 ranked Super Mario Bros. The best video game of all time, citing its revolutionary gameplay and its role in helping recover the North American gaming industry from the video game crash of '83. In 2014, IGN named Super Mario Bros. The best Nintendo game, saying it was the most important Nintendo game ever made. In 2005, IGN named it the greatest video game of all time. In 2015, the Strong National Museum of Play inducted Super Mario Bros. Into its World Video Game Hall of Fame. In 2017, Polygon ranked it the 8th best Super Mario game, crediting it for starting this franchise's habit of being an exception to so many rules. In 2018, Business Insider named it the second best Super Mario game. Several critics have praised the game for its precise controls, which allow the player to control how high and far Mario or Luigi jumps and how fast he runs. Allgame gave Super Mario Bros. A 5-star rating, stating that the sense of excitement, wonder, and most of all enjoyment felt upon first playing this masterpiece of a video game can't barely be put into words. And while its sequels have far surpassed it in terms of length, graphics, sound, and other aspects, Super Mario Bros., like any classic, whether of a cinematic or musical nature, has withstood the test of time, continuing to be fun and playable, and that any gamer needs to play this game at least once, if not simply for a history lesson. Reviewing the Virtual Console's release of the game, IGN called it an absolute must for any gamer's Virtual Console collection. Darren Calvert of Nintendo Life called the game's visuals unavoidably outdated compared to newer games, but mused that they were impressive at the time that the game was released. The success of the Super Mario Bros. Led to the development of many successors in the Super Mario series of video games, which in turn formed the core of greater Mario franchise. Two of the sequels, Super Mario Bros. 2 and Super Mario Bros. 3, were direct sequels to the game and were released for the NES, experiencing similar levels of commercial success. A different sequel, also titled Super Mario Bros. 2, was released for the Famicom Disk System in 1986 exclusively in Japan and was later re-released elsewhere under the name Super Mario Bros. The Lost Level. The gameplay concepts and elements established in Super Mario Bros. Are prevalent in nearly every Super Mario game. The series consists of over 15 entries. At least one Super Mario game has been released on nearly every Nintendo console to date. Super Mario 64 is widely considered one of the greatest games ever made and is largely credited with revolutionizing the platforming genre of video games and its step from 2D to 3D. The series is one of the best-selling, with more than 310 million units sold worldwide as of September of 2015. In 2010, Nintendo released special red variants of the Wii and Nintendo DSi XL consoles in repackaged, Mario-themed limited edition bundles as part of the 25th anniversary of the game's original release. To celebrate this series' 30th anniversary, Nintendo released Super Mario Maker, a game for the Wii U which allows players to create custom platforming stages using assets from Super Mario games and in the style of Super Mario Bros., along with other styles based around different games in the series. The game's success helped to push Mario as a worldwide cultural icon. In 1990, a study taken in North America suggested that more children in the United States were familiar with Mario than they were with Mickey Mouse, another popular media character. The game's musical score, composed by Koji Kondo, particularly the game's overworld theme, has become a prevalent aspect of popular culture, with the latter theme being featured in nearly every single Super Mario game. Alongside the NES platform, Super Mario Bros. Is often credited for having resurrected the video game industry after the market crash of '83. In the United States Supreme Court case Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association, the Electronic Frontier Foundation submitted an amicus brief which supported overturning a law which would have banned violent video games in the state of California. The brief cited social research that declared several games, including Super Mario Bros., to contain cartoon violence similar to that of children's programs such as Mighty Mouse and Roadrunner that garnered little negative reaction from the public. Because of its status within the video game industry and being an early Nintendo game, mint condition copies of Super Mario Bros. Have been considered collector's items. In 2019, the auction of a near-mint sealed box version of the game was sold for just over $100,000, and which is considered to have drawn wider interest in the field of video game collecting. 1 year later, in July 2020, a similar near-mint sealed box copy of the game from the period when Nintendo was transitioning from sticker seals to shrink wrap was sold for $114,000 at the time, the highest price ever for a single video game. Video game developer Yuji Naka has cited Super Mario Bros. As a large inspiration toward the concept for immensely successful 1991 Genesis game, Sonic the Hedgehog. According to Naka, the game was conceived when he was speedrunning World 1-1 of Super Mario Bros. And considered a platformer based on moving as fast as possible. Super Mario Bros. Inspired several fan games. In 2009, developer Swing Swing released Tuper Tario Tros? I don't know. Okay. A game which combines elements of Super Mario Bros. With Tetris. Super Mario Bros. Crossover, a PC fan game developed by Jay Pavlina, and released in 2010 as a free browser-based game, is a full recreation of Super Mario Bros. That allows the player to alternatively control various other characters from Nintendo games, including Mega Man, Link from The Legend of Zelda, Samus Aran from Metroid, and Simon Belmont from Castlevania. Mari Zero, released in December of 2012, combines elements of the game with that of Portal from 2007, and by giving Mario a portal-making gun with which to teleport through the level. And Full Screen Mario from 2013 adds a level editor. In 2015, game designer Josh Millard released Enuigi, okay, a metafictional fan game with commentary on the original game, which relates to Luigi's inability to come to terms with the game's overall lack of narrative. Super Mario Bros. is substantial in speedrunning esports, with coverage beyond video gaming and a specific version for the Guinness World Records. At the celebration of the game's 25th anniversary at Nintendo World Store, then record holder Andrew G. attempted a speedrun as creator Miyamoto watched. In 2021, speedrunner Nifsky set a historic milestone with the first run under 4 minutes and 55 seconds. Minus World. The Minus World, or Negative World, or World -1, is an unbeatable glitch level present in the original NES release. World 1-2 contains a hidden warp zone with warp pipes that transport the player to Worlds 2, 3, and 4, accessed by running over a wall near the exit. If the player is able to exploit a bug that allows Mario to pass through bricks, the player can enter the warp zone by passing through the wall and the pipe to World 2-1, and 4-1 may instead transport the player to an underwater stage labeled World -1. This stage's map is identical to Worlds 2-2 and 7-2, and upon entering the warp pipe at the end, the player is taken back to the start of the level, thus trapping the player in the level until all lives have been lost. Although the level name is shown as -1, with a leading space on the heads-up display, it is actually World 36-1, with the tile for 36 being shown as a blank space. The Minus World bug in Japanese Famicom Disk System version of the game behaves differently and creates multiple completable stages. World -1 is an underwater version of World 1-3 with an underwater level color palette and underwater level music, and contains sprites of Princess Toadstool, Bowser, and Hammer Brothers. World -2 is an identical copy of World 7-3, and World -3 is a copy of World 4-4, with an underground level color palette and underground level music, and does not loop if the player takes the wrong path, contrary to the original World 4-4. After completing the level, Toad's usual message is displayed, but Toad himself is absent. After completing these levels, the game returns to the title screen as if completed, and is now replayable as if in a harder mode, which it is higher than World 8. There are hundreds of glitch levels beyond Minus World. 256 worlds are present, including the 8 playable ones, which can be accessed in a multitude of ways, such as cheat codes or ROM hacking. The Super Mario Bros. Series has inspired various media productions. In October of 1985, Takuma Shoten published the book Super Mario Bros. The Complete Strategy Guide. Its content is partly recycled from the Family Computer magazine, plus new content written by Naoto Yamamoto, who received no royalties. It is Japan's best-selling book of 1985 at 630,000 copies sold. It is also Japan's best-selling book of 1986 with 860,000 copies sold by January of 86, and a total of 1.3 million. Nintendo of America later translated it to English as How to Win at Super Mario Bros. And published it in North America via the Nintendo Fun Club and early issues of Nintendo Power magazine. The 1986 anime film Super Mario Bros. The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach is acknowledged as one of the first feature-length films to be based directly off of a video game, and one of the earliest isekai anime. The American animated television stories Super Mario Bros. Super Show ran from 1989 to 1990, starring professional wrestler Lou Albano as Mario and Danny Wells as Luigi. The live-action Super Mario Bros. Film was released theatrically in 1993, starring Bob Hoskins, as Mario and John Leguizamo as Luigi. On April 5th, 2023, the Super Mario Bros. Movie, an animated feature film based on the series and created by Illumination Entertainment, was released. Super Mario Bros. Was adapted into a pinball machine by Gottlieb, released in 1992. It became one of America's top 10 best-selling pinball machines of 92, receiving a gold award from the American Amusement Machine Association. When putting this video together, I considered making this a two-part build video, making a separate video for the console and game pack, and then another one for the Super Mario on the 80s style TV. Ultimately, I decided to keep the single video format because this is a single set. As far as the size goes, the controller did feel to be the right size in my hand, but the console and game were scaled down a little bit. The TV we had did have the dials on the side growing up. We did not get a TV with a remote until later, but it was encased in a carved wooden box that was far too big and heavy to be put on any kind of stand. Many rainy evenings and nights were spent sitting on the floor in front of these boob tubes, taking turns, drawing graphs, or having to write out ridiculously long passwords for a save. My siblings and I did grow up with an NES, and we shared a small collection of really great games mixed with games that were impossible or just plain not very good. If you had games from LGN, that little rainbow logo, you know what I'm talking about. As far as Super Mario games go, we only owned two. Some of our friends had some of the other ones. We had Super Mario's / Duck Hunt, that one singular cartridge that came with as a pack-in with the system, and Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES. I also had Super Mario Land on the Game Boy, but that is a topic for another time. My favorite games were Super Mario Bros. 3 and Legend of Zelda. I can confirm that while a lot of people who had the NES had some issues with them being finicky, ours worked really well. We did also blow into the cartridges for some of the games, and if that didn't work, we would lightly moisten a Q-tip with rubbing alcohol and try to clean the pins on the insides of the cartridge. I did dig my NES out of the basement and plugged her into our TV in, I want to say it was around 2002 to 2003, and she looked great. Almost no discoloration. The gray was still, it wasn't any different than the little hatch, the closing latch on the front case, and she worked just fine. Although I did kink up some of the controller wires because I used to chew on them. I don't know why I did that. I just would sit there with the controller in my hand and then have the cord, because it was long enough, in my mouth, and I was chewing on it as I was playing. I never broke the rubber on the cord, so luckily I never got shocked or anything. I do regret letting her go with the games. She was sold in a garage sale when I went to college. Playing Super Mario Bros. Now feels strange. I didn't remember how slippery Mario's controls used to be, but I definitely have more patience now to keep trying to get to the end of the game. Our build time was 5 hours, 59 minutes, and 38 seconds. The console, controller, and game pack or cartridge was completed in 2 hours, 37 minutes, and 53 seconds. The TV, stand, and moving game screen took about 3 hours, 21 minutes, and 15 seconds. I was able to beat the game after 4 hours, 15 minutes, 51 seconds with 105 deaths. The new adventure that opened seemed to just swap the enemies, but was otherwise the same game. I also was able to get to world -1, and we looked at some of that. Next was Super Mario All-Stars version with the improved graphics and save state. I was able to finish the game using the warp pipes in 23 minutes, 30 seconds, ending my gameplay with Super Mario The Lost Levels, the Japanese release for Super Mario 2, at level 3-2. If you enjoyed this comparison video and want to play the games, I recommend the retro versions for punishment and updated versions for a more enjoyable experience. Remember to like, subscribe, ring that bell, all the things for the YouTubes.